Are we exhausted from the week yet? Are we out networked, out paneled? What's the consensus? No, the joke didn't land. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's probably been a long week for everyone, so excited to cap it off with today's panel. My name is Anela Bokhari. I am a sales leader at Google Cloud. My team partners with early-stage companies across the U.S., shows them the value of leveraging our technology to help scale their growth. Incredibly excited to be co-hosting today with Betsy of CloudWorks. Just a little bit more about me in terms of my tie into this. A couple years ago, I founded Women in Web3 at Google. Like probably many of you in the room, you caught the Web3 bug at some moment or some tip you got from someone and was never looking back. And that happened to me about 3 or so years ago. So founding the community at Google was my way to really address the diversity gap that exists within the ecosystem. And unfortunately, if you look at the stats, that diversity gap has actually widened as a result of some of the recent headlines and macro environment. So I'm so excited today to kind of bring to life more of the important use cases that blockchain is bringing forward and hopefully share some new information with all of you today. So thank you again, and I'll pass over to Betsy to share more.
Wonderful. Thanks, Anela. Is this on? Yep, we're good. Betsy Reed, I am the CRO and co-founder of CloudWorks. We are a Google exclusive partner. What that means is we ride shotgun and along with the Google Cloud team to bring the best in breed technology and engineering resources to support specifically the startup community, but businesses of all kinds in their journey with Google Cloud. So whether that's securing or architecting or scaling, utilizing all of the various tools and technology that Google has to share, we partner with the Google team to bring that to bear. So thrilled to be here. The startup community is also really near and dear to us because that's where we got our start and where we continue to have a large amount of our business. So we are a startup as well. So I'm a female founder of a startup organization. So excited for the conversation today. And without further ado, let's get going.
Okay, so today's panel, really two main themes we're going to talk about. First is, as I mentioned, sort of bringing to life some of these blockchain use cases, specifically within the sustainability and financial services space. And then the second piece is we're all part of the panelists are all part of early stage companies here. When you think about how you achieve your ambitions, a lot of that goes into how are you hiring? What do your teams look like? What technology partnerships do you have? What broader partnerships do you have? So all the scaffolding that goes into place that really helps you be successful. And so we'll touch upon both of those. But without further ado, I'll turn it over to our fellow panelists, introduction, where you work, and maybe your story or journey into the Web3 space. Miriam, if you want to kick off?
Of course. Hi, I'm Mariam Ayati. I'm co-founder of Water Protocol for commodities. I'm a long-term commodities person, and before this, ran Shell Trading's global origination and investments team, looking after cross-commodity deal-making. So the largest portfolio of traded physical commodities on the planet, and a really good place to start looking at what might this ecosystem of Web3 and blockchain do. I co-founded some of the very first blockchains for enterprise. We launched to 60-70% of Brent crude market using the first one. So like you, early to the blockchain world, I think we launched our first one in 2017. And a couple of years ago, I decided it was time to leave the mothership and create a neutral home for physical commodities to create an elevated class that is traced and bought and sold in an economy that values all of the externalities the same way that we value their heating value and calorific content. Pleasure to be here.
Hey everyone, my name is Sochi Cazador. I'm part of the founding team at the Celo Foundation. I lead ecosystem growth. So Celo, for those of you that don't know, is a mobile-first, carbon-negative blockchain that was launched on Earth Day of 2020. So we recently celebrated our 3-year anniversary. We were one of the first blockchains to really embrace climate change and really embrace this notion of using the technology for impact. So one of the very first governance proposals was to allocate a percentage of the block rewards to offset carbon. And really exciting that we continue on this journey, and happy to explore more about that. My own personal journey into blockchain, I was an executive for a Fortune 500 company for many years, but my family's also from a really small town in Mexico that didn't have running water or electricity. I've seen firsthand how access to financial tools, can change lives. And it was really important for me to bring these two worlds closer together. And I think I took the red pill and now the green pill. And I'm excited to be here with all of you and chat some more.
Thank you both.
Wonderful. Thank you. So really honored to be in your presence today and hear more about your stories. When we talk with folks that are really the innovators, the people in the world that are taking big risks and chances, it's just humbling to be around those types of passion, that type of passion, right? And so it's easy to sit up here and hear people's stories and be wowed, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes when you're founding a company, right? So I'd love to know from each of you, what are some of the early stage struggles that you experienced? How did you overcome those? And what types of support systems, networks did you leverage to help get through those times?
Kick it off, yes. So at Cello, we really wanted to focus on how we can take this really complex idea of blockchain and make it easy for the everyday user. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges that we had. We knew that we weren't going to be able to solve that from San Francisco or from Berlin, right? We had to go into the field. And one of the things that we embraced early on was this notion of, going into the field, understanding what some of the problems are, and really co-designing with communities. And so that was like a big part of our story. I'm smiling at Will Lee in the back there. That was really instrumental in doing this. We're really applying a lot of the principles of design thinking in the communities. And I think the other part of your question is, how do you build a team around this, right? And so it was really looking for a diverse background, folks that were, in the world of philanthropy, folks that were in the world of technology, folks that were in the world of design thinking. How do you bring some of the greatest minds together to solve some of these really big problems?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
I guess for me as well, female founder, single mom, raising a family and trying to do all of that as you abandon the corporate infrastructure that gives you incredible support and incredible backing. So that's a reality check that you sort of wake up one day and you go, can't call in sick. That's not real anymore. Then the second thing is surrounding yourself with humans who do become your safety net and finding that talent pool, which again, going from a world of lots of pre-screened talent to pick from, which all of us have in large institutions, to really getting much better at understanding who out there in the real world without that pre-screening is going to come in, not just be really great at their job, but amplify the culture and amplify the integrity you want to embody and give you the voice that you want to expand. And when they speak about your work, it sort of resonates as being genuine and authentic. So people. And the second thing was exactly actually like you say, is making sure the work we're doing is relevant every day to the people whose lives we hope to impact. I used to run supply chains in Nigeria, all across Africa, and exactly like you described, there's a whole world that many of us never experience and we never actually see firsthand. And we have so much ability with the technology, the resources, and the real wealth that sits behind everyone here to make an impact. But how do you do that without being diminishing or patronizing or assuming that you kind of know what those communities want? And so making sure being intimate and close and developing with those communities and with your customers and suppliers has been lots of fun, but also lots of work.
I love the attention on people, the idea of amplifying the culture. I know I'm going through my own hiring a team journey right now, and I think that's definitely something very important to me. It seems that the through line through a lot of, both of your work is kind of more impact like blockchain for impact, whether social, whether, disrupting a $1 trillion industry of commodities. Betsy and I were talking, a lot in the audience are fairly new to the blockchain space. Maybe this is their first exposure. And I think it could be, overwhelming sometimes to understand what this all means. So I thought maybe we could have both of you break it down a bit more in terms of actual use cases when you think about what you're doing with your technologies. Like, in more like non-blockchain based speak, like what are we actually solving for at the end of the day to help bring this to life?
I can go. So, when I was at Shell, something that would happen often to us is outside of our offices at Shell Center, there'd be all these amazing humans who care, who'd fly all over the world and come to protest because we are one of the largest oil companies on the planet. And so often I'd go and have lunch with them and I'd ask them how they got there. Did you cycle? Where do you plug in your laptop? Do you know that there's coal power generation? How do you get to a place where activism has the information it needs so that when they are protesting to change the world for good versus protesting while burning jet fuel to fly from California and burning coal to power their laptops, right? So one of the things that's always been really important to me is how do we get to a world where we understand as consumers the footprint our consumption finances, and we are empowered to choose and send signals upstream. Because I can tell you in my producer's seat, in my old role, we worked incredibly hard to do good, but it's very hard to understand what good is and what people value. Do you want electricity or do you want low carbon? Do you want food or do you want no agriculture? And so water is about creating the core infrastructure that allows the producers of agriculture, metals, energy to get direct feedback from the consumers of all of those goods through a series of backbone infrastructure so that the consumer prices the externalities of what we consume. So you can, hopefully one day, go and buy an Apple phone, an iPhone, and you can see whether there's one that matches and aligns with the values you've told your app you care about. You choose that. But the question is, will you pay $50 more for that? Will you pay $10 more for that? Or will we not, right? And that's a huge social experiment around our values and what they're worth to us. But the only way to put a price on them is to be able to define them from a consumer all the way upstream. What we're seeing is big companies like Apple, big companies like Tesla, BMW, Mitsubishi, many of the folks that many of our partners work with do care. They are putting a premium and they are only buying good. And we're providing the infrastructure for the identity of those resources to contain the externalities. Does that make sense?
That was so eloquently said.
Oh, thank you.
I was like having chills at some moments. Thank you so much. Yes. And I think those are the type of explanations and more importantly, the stories that I think really resonate and bring this home, and that gets through all the headlines that people are just seeing when, they read the news. Like it's surfacing this, which is why I love doing panels and having these talks. It really brings to life some of these efforts. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and from a Cello perspective, we have a very vibrant ecosystem. There are thousands of projects in over 150 countries. And some of the projects that excite me the most are the projects that are really impacting local communities, right? One example that I love to share is a project called Gainforest. And if you think about the problem that we have, with climate, blockchain, I think, has this potential to address a lot of the coordination failures. World Economic Forum recently published a report on this, and that's really exciting. But to take it back to Gainforest in this example, there is basically a community in the Philippines that is being taught how to measure a mangrove forest over time. Not only are they taught how to measure this, but they're actually receiving incentives to do this. And if you think about what climate incentives look like in the US, right? You have large corporations that will purchase carbon offsets, and so it directly impacts the corporations, not the communities that are measuring it. So projects like Gain Forest are a way to give back to those communities, to give them an opportunity to earn, right, and to be a part of this and to benefit from it. And so that's one project that I love to share. And another one that I think is worth mentioning as well is a project called Collectivo in Curacao. They're amazing. Luke Weber and team have just done really brilliant stuff. So from a Curacao perspective, they had a large tie to Venezuela with oil refineries, and basically were in a state where they had to import a lot of their foods. And they forgot how to grow foods locally. That sort of was lost. And so you have projects like Collectivo that are teaching the communities how to create soil, how to grow food. You see these beautiful food forests that are emerging and these circular economies that are like benefiting these local communities. And those projects are the ones that really inspire me and that I love to talk about.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. To your point, this helps to educate and give real-world examples to those that are novice in this space. And to that kind of end or theme and the headline comment that you've been making, Web3 blockchain can be a very polarizing term, especially to those who don't understand it. And I think in terms of technology, when there's something that's very cutting edge and you don't understand it, we're humans, there's fear, things we don't understand, or change that we might see that's impending. So the real world examples are amazing, but in terms of those polarized by this, what are some ways that you guys have or currently help to address that through education and kind of combat that to help adoption of your technology in this space? Or is that something that you guys have as a challenge in general?
Well, from our perspective, we're working with some of the most regulated institutions and industries on the planet, touching the core of the resource economy. And so understanding all of the compliance considerations when you touch that is critical. So we start with a foundation of compliance. I think we have more law firms and compliance people on supporting us and making sure everything we do makes sense. We communicate a lot, and I don't presume to educate, but we learn a lot from our partners and customers around what it is they value, and we reintegrate that. We try to the extent possible to put the technology behind the scenes, right? We often work with email, but I don't have to describe to people how Web2 works, right? My job isn't to sell Web3 or to think about blockchain unless we're in rooms like this where people intimately are curious about it. My job is to use the best tools possible to bridge gaps in the market to give people what they want to do, which is power to influence the choices they make in their consumption. And I think the most powerful thing that I have found in my career is technology is important, it has to work, but it needs to be behind the scenes. If you have the compliance guardrails to protect from any shortcomings in the regulatory system that governs that technology, then you're fine. And we always find that the tech partners behind us and working with us also create a huge support network of infrastructure to make sure we don't fail in any of our deliverables, right? So it's a collective, it's a safety web. You make sure none of the holes of the Swiss cheese of risk are left open. Compliance goes on top, and it doesn't have to be the headline topic.
Just a quick pulse before I answer. How many of you in the room work in Web3 today? Okay, great, majority. So, and the reason I asked that question is I think we are all responsible for changing this narrative, right? So right now, how do we measure success of blockchains, right? We're looking at things like total value locked. And yes, that is important, right? But that's one of the many metrics that exist, right? And so how do we change this narrative to look at what is the impact collectively that we have as an industry? We launched early on in 2019 this theory of change, and it was how do we measure impact based on the number of trees that were planted, the number of lives that are changed in terms of being able to access financial tools that weren't accessible before. And so I think this is part of our responsibility as an industry. How do we do that? Last week was Ultrasound Week. We published a dashboard that actually shows Cello's carbon footprint and some really exciting announcements, just again to demonstrate what some of that change is. But I think as an industry, I put that all on us. We need to collectively do this. Yeah.
So I heard a few things, a lot of extracting away the complexity, right, where it's not even a conversation piece. You know, I feel like the example a lot of people use is, you know, when the internet started, right? Oh, like internet for this vertical or that. It just becomes part of everything at the end of the day, right? You're not calling it out that this is running on the internet. It just is. And I think the more we have the innovators charging forward with real life business challenges that are being solved and efficiencies that can be gleaned, all that, the jargon, the complexity, like having to oversell this concept starts to fade to the background. But I still truly believe we're very much in early days of this, right? So that's why I love being able to highlight some of these stories. I want to be mindful of time and be able to open it up to the audience for any Q&A. But Betsy, I did want to hear from you because you obviously are partnering with a lot of companies in the startup ecosystem, not just within the blockchain space, but throughout all different verticals and different business lines. I'm just curious from where you sit, what are you seeing or where are you seeing a lot of success come from these early stage companies? What does that look like? And I guess how is like your organization helping play a small part in that as well?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it plays so well to all that you've shared today because these are, you know, somewhat startup organizations. These are folks with passion. What I'm seeing is, and it's not rocket science, right? But it's technology has to serve the world. It's not technology for technology's sake or for tinkering's sake. It has a purpose, it has a background, and it sits in the background. It is meant to be an enablement mechanism for the innovation of the world, which everybody, I just feel like this is, you know, a little bit of a buzzword, but there is an awakening and people care about these things intimately and feel passionately about them. So with that, it has to back up to, I mean, you think about the ways people are interacting, so social commerce and AI, machine, you know, AI, ML, you see a lot in the blockchain space, right? But I think the undercurrent that we notice with the startups, and we have over 200 customers that are startup companies, we have created the mechanisms to help them scale with velocity, right? Because one thing that we recognize is when you're getting started, and I know this because 3 years ago I was getting started, having the right people, the right partners, the right technology and tools to help you get further faster and understand how you can really, I would say, accelerate that growth is really important, and then retaining culture. But everything, every element I just mentioned has to go back to your why. And if you do not have a very solid why, it all falls apart. So that is like, it's kind of a very 10,000-foot view, but that is what I've seen. And when I get the opportunity, actually, one more thing, to sit down with many of the founders of our companies, and I do a podcast series with them, and that's what I ask them about. Why are you doing this? You risked it all. Like, I get it, I'm crazy, but you're crazy too. Want to be crazy together, right? And so I get to hear these incredible stories and what they go through. And so knowing that we partner with Google Cloud to enable startups and help them as they're going through these early, subtle stages of growth, and then we get to be a part of the successes when they hit that first milestone is like abundantly gratifying, and that's our why.
Thank you for that, Betsy. I think that was kind of a good note to end on, and we can open it up to the audience if there's any questions.
Not all at once.
Oh.
Yes.
Anela, could you touch on the Web3 and digital asset team that Google recently launched and the startup program that's come along with it?
Yeah, so maybe some of you in the room have attended some of the Google events this week. It was definitely a big week for Google Cloud as it relates to Web3. I think to the theme that we heard here, like how can we enable early stage companies with the scaffolding, the resources, the benefits that really help them scale fast. So there was a slew of announcements that were made around some partnerships that allow certain early stage companies to have access to different grants. And I know Cello is one of them, if you want to share a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cello's really proud to partner with Google. One of the things that we like to do in terms of looking at partnerships for the ecosystem is how are we helping founders? And so the partnership with Google was natural. I think also what Google has done with sustainability overall just made like a very natural fit. So we have committed $1 million in grants to support founders that are building on Cello and Google. And we also have a cloud credit program, but I think this is the start of the relationship. We're really excited about what's coming next, and there's some things in the works, so stay tuned. Yeah.
Yeah, and for any of those who are interested, find one of the many Googlers that are here today. We can definitely share more about what our product roadmap looks like for this ecosystem. It is an area that we're investing in heavily. We have announced a blockchain node engine. We have different blockchain data sets that are available for people to query and extract insights from. But at the end of the day, we really want to have a meaningful dent on this ecosystem. So thank you for the question. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question for Mariam. You mentioned the interesting business model you currently have and how it's built on blockchain. Why is that not possible on the incumbent, and why is it only possible on blockchain?
I love it. Thank you. So I did a talk yesterday and at the conference, and unfortunately, so I put up, because everyone asks me this, and the other thing they ask me is, do you really need to worry about fraud in paper-based instruments? Do you worry about, because our underlying tech is about pan-protocol identity, pan-protocol KYC AML while being open, and asset identity. And so everyone asks, do you really need that? And I had a slide of just the press cuttings from the last 3 months of the billions of dollars lost in commodities because they either had fraudulent identity. Trafigura lost $597 million because it bought fake nickel from a known fraudster. The London Metals Exchange was found to be housing stones that it was using as the sort of as the security for its metals pricing. The Perth Mint was just found to have $9 billion of goofy gold that it was minting that wasn't properly gold. And it's not, some of that is fraud. Like the gentleman who defrauded Trafigura was a known fraudster to other industry participants. And so what we have is transferable identity and KYC that lives in your own sovereign vault, which you share. And so your transactions with everyone else is available. And if you're dodgy in one place, that's shared across everything, right? Blockchain can enable that. If it lives on a spreadsheet or a database, it's infinitely hackable and you're no longer sovereign. So there's no point in doing it. Asset identity, it would be really hard to sell me stones and pretend they're nickels, that it's nickel, if it had come out of any of the minds of our partners who had an asset identity living on the water blockchain and it moved with it. And there's so many cases like this, even in the last week. If you're curious, because I was so bummed, the number of the number of pop-ups I had made their system crash. So it didn't pop up, but I thought that's even better, because in the middle of showing how many press cuttings there are, it just crashed the consensus system. But it did, I'm not joking. But if you send me a ping, I'll send you examples of this. We can't do it on Web 2. And if we do, we perpetuate the problem of putting the data in the hands of a centralized organization, and it becomes infinitely hackable, and it's such sensitive data. So I could never take the stuff I was doing previously inside one of the largest trading houses and take it the next step without going fully decentralized and building an open blockchain. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Thank you for the question.
Great question. One more?
I have a question for Mariam as well. What was the MVP that you built?
Well, we have built the protocol first. So you need a layer 1 because there was no layer 1 that existed that could accommodate regulated institutions while being open, right? So the water identity is our core feature, and then the asset identity. The first piece of infrastructure on it is a marketplace for over-the-counter buy-sell of ethical commodities, which are tokenized, but they're producers and they're buyers. And so you're buying and selling on-chain for the first time without compromising on privacy and creating those identities and asset identities. There's an exchange being built and going through regulatory approval by one of our partners. That's going to be the next piece. And we've today announced that TUSD, which is the first US dollar-backed regulated stablecoin, just launched on our DevNet. So it's a $2 billion coin, and it makes us the hub for much of the activity with stablecoins in Polkadot. So we are the underlying code, so the internet for commodities, and then many of our partners are building the infrastructure to go on top of it.
And how did you onboard your first users and customers, or if you have them?
We have, so our users and customers like to be secret because they are large and they're going through this journey of learning Web3. And like you said, there's a lot of angst. And so we have smaller organizations where we're partners with a lot of African producers. Those are public. And they're farmers and farmers collectives and aggregators. So really putting their flows through, giving them last mile access to capital, decentralized lending, etc. Those, for me, although they're working protocols, in my mind, they're proofs of concept for the really giant plays of industry giants, right? And so we start small, we experiment on the ground, and we've done a lot of those. And you can look up our website or ping me, and I'll give you some examples. Thank you for the question.
Oh, one more.
At the beginning, you mentioned the diversity gap within the space. I'd love to hear what message you'd like to share with women who are newer to the concept.
I really appreciate that question. I think the last stat I saw was like percentage of participants that are male is well over like 85%. Don't fact check me on that, but it was definitely a very large, overwhelming majority in one direction. And, you know, I go back and forth in that. I see Jess in the audience. We talk about this a lot. And I think when I first started the community, I was doing a lot of these happy hours, but I didn't see the change yet. I think for me, it's this type of conversation. It's highlighting these use cases, getting people excited who might have never even thought to give it a thought before, to say, wow, that's an incredible business model that's being built right now. I want to be a part of that. So for me, I think it's more the awareness of, for everyone, for them to, you know, get excited by it and want to participate in one small way, whether it's, you know, joining a company like we see on stage here, whether it's investing in their first token, whether it's exploring NFTs, setting up a wallet. It's like just kind of taking those first steps to experience what this technology is. I think that for me has become, you know, more of the important piece. It's raising awareness of by highlighting these types of stories, and then thinking through for organizations that are in the space right now, what do your teams look like? Does everyone look the same on your team? Are you thinking about hiring from a diverse set? What does the population of females look like in your executive suite? Little things like that, I think, for those that are already in the ecosystem, how are you also playing a part in that? And I think that's the other element that's also really important, which is why I was so thrilled, you know, to have, you know, an all-women panel today, because there's so much great work being done. Unfortunately, it's not the norm, right? So how can we change that? Appreciate that question.
And I think just adding on to that, I think you have to be intentional, right? So I shared a little bit about my background. I grew up in the shadow of Silicon Valley, I like to say, East San Jose, for those of you that know, predominantly Latino community. And what strikes me is, like, yes, you can fundraise if you have access to investors, right? So Sand Hill Road is quite famous for this. Cello was very intentional with the grant program. So we wanted to go out to where the builders were that weren't in these tech hubs. So going out to areas in emerging markets and really looking at where the diversity is with female founders. So over 50% of the grants that we've issued have been to founders that are from emerging markets and female founders. That's something that I'm quite proud of. Yeah.
Can I add something to that? I find as I get older, the more I understand and appreciate the support of other women around me. When I was very, very young and very early in my Shell career, my boss was on the Shell board, and a lady called Anne Picard, and if you look her up, she's notorious for taking Shell to drill in Alaska. So a tough cookie. But Anne used to always tell me, she said, Maria, my generation's job was to get into the room, but we had to get into the room and look like the boys. She said, my job now is to let you get into the room, be yourself, and empower you. And I think if each of us take that baton and think about the next generation and how we empower, elevate, and not just about gender, but anything who is not the same as us and others, then we create this virtuous cycle. And I experience that more every day of a community that elevates me, and I, in return, try to elevate others. So I think it's on every single one of us to do that and own it, and we're so powerful when we do.
That's actually a great segue, because the one of the organizations that have empowered me so much is the Flow Carbon team. I don't know if anyone's in this room right now. Oh, there you are. The Flow Carbon team have been incredible for me, pushing me in areas to grow, being able to lead discussions like this. So 100% to what you just said. And a huge thank you to the Flow Carbon team for throwing this event and for having us on stage here today. That definitely how I would love to wrap this.
That's probably the highlight comment. If you're empowering women by also doing an amazing event and bringing together this community, that is hugely exciting. And
I have one closing comment before we wrap. This has been amazing. In the spirit of that, Google Cloud, CloudWorks, we paired up to put together a startup accelerator program. Down on the signage on the first floor, there's a QR code. If you want more information, scan that. It'll take you to a lander. Reach out, and we'll give you more information. I also have cards with me, so come up, talk to Anela or I. But we're committed to empowering founders, first movers, any folks, not just in the female community, but everyone. But to that end, we want to, thank you guys for your time. This has been absolutely amazing.
Huge thank you.
Thank you guys for being an awesome audience. And thank you, Anela, for inviting me to participate.
Of course.
And let's go have some
Yeah.
sushi
Friday.
and some drinks.
Thanks, everyone.